Rico Gatson, Loren Munk, the artist, whose work focused mostly in New York. There's other body of work that focuses in Brooklyn, and other part of Brooklyn also locale, so we'll get to that in a minute. And of course, Katherine Bradford. We don't really have much thing in common besides being artists ourselves, but one thing we have in common is that we were early pioneers. We are early Brooklynites. When Brooklyn was super inexpensive, when Brooklyn was, I would say, frighteningly desolate as a borough. I remember in order to get a friend to come out per year was a blessing. So it's way before it became very popular around 98, I think. So it's before David and Victoria Beckham named their son, their first son, Brooklyn. That was also the same time, by the way, 1998. Also the same year that the Brooklyn Rail was created as a bi-monthly pamphlet, 8.5 inches by 11 inches. We fold it in half, so appear 4 columns, and we give it away to the L train commuters. Maybe Rick is one of them. Very few people go to work in these days on Bedford Avenue L train. But here we are, being together at the moment, and I know that none of them needs any kind of introduction, but I will try to give you my best haiku description. So let's start out with Rico. Rico, when I think of Rico, I think of Sun Ra and his fabulous orchestra. And he regarded that orchestra as a musical vessel to reinvestigate, as a kind of a visual symbol to reconstitute kind of aspiration, Africa unite and strength. And I often think of Rico's work as a way to reconstitute, deploying the early modernism, particularly the photo collage and propaganda poster among the Russian constructivists. And he's able to reconfigure, reinvent for his own kind, I would say, cosmic reinvention. And it's fabulous. You probably know the work. I don't need to say any further. Kathy, an old friend too, and we met probably around 95, a little bit before you, same time with Loren. And I think of Kathy mostly because of her fabulous show at the Portland Museum of Art. Some of us had made effort to go there probably about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. The Flying Woman. I think of Kathy as the Flying Woman. I think Kathy was not born in Maine, but she had many admiration artists from Maine, particularly Maurice Hartley. And when I think of Kathy, I think of how she found her freedom through the identification of the alchemy of water and the sea of Maine. And I have followed her work ever since. You can see the heart-won unity in Kathy. And she walks up and down the stair without the need to rest her hand on the handrail. It's called walking without a banister. That's why she flies. Loren is an old friend too. I think I met Loren probably the summer of 2000 when he was writing already for Art magazine, New York Art magazine. Yeah, and he called up, I think one morning, the weekend, he heard that I was curating a show entitled An Homage to Albertine Camaraderie, a great, 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 great artist who I've been thinking lately, maybe we'll do another show of that similar theme, but in a bigger space. But this was at a defunct small space, former garage space in Greenpoint. It's called State of the Art. And he came to my home where the work was being spread out just before installation, and I was so impressed by Loren, he identified every single work of art was there. There was a beautiful painting by Gandhi Brody, Forrest Bass, an early Chris Martin, very early Chris Martin, of course, that his friend Bill Jensen Caddy was in it, Margaret Luchak, Don Goizin, among others. And he was so kind, he wrote a beautiful, thoughtful review for the magazine. And that very fall, around October 2000, he wrote another review of my own show. By the way, that's okay to do that, to help out your friend. There's a longer story, I won't go into it. But basically, I had a show, it's called Homage to Taplin. It was opened in the same week the Brooklyn Rail as a magazine was launched. Very important to pay the emphasis why the rail was created in October. It's not that it's similar to October magazine, whose reference, of course, October, the film Sergei Eisenstein, 10 Days That Took the World, you probably remember, that took the world, that was written by John Reed, the first American communist that came to Russia, that wrote that very famous book that turned into the movie. But I'm thinking about how he understood the implication that the Rail October is reference to the people. So it's not just October magazine that publishes focus mostly post-structuralist or very well-known academic. So I'm in debt to Loren. We've been doing it together, writing together, talking together for so long. So it's just so nice to be here with him. So we're going to talk very casually. Both Rico, Kathy, and I have a few questions. And then maybe 40 minutes, would love if you can participate and have your own question. So why don't I do my first question? I would like to ask Loren. I don't know how he find the energy, the stamina. So where is the work ethic come from? Does it come from your upbringing? Or I know you spent 3 years in the army. Where does it come from, Loren?
Well, thank you, Phong. And before I answer the question, I would just like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank Phong and Kalm for the great job they've done in organizing this, installing the show, designing the layout, Benno, and all the people here at Ruttkowski. I hope that other people have a chance to experience this kind of attention, because it's one of the things you kind of hope for as you're working along as an artist, that somebody will give you a little attention at some point. Back to the question of my work ethic, and whether it came from the military or not. I was in the Army, and I remember I was in basic training at Fort Ord, and you have to do these various jobs, and so I'm in the kitchen or something, and we're peeling potatoes, and he's sort of like, people looking at it. One of the guys going, what's wrong with you? You're so happy. I mean, we're in the Army, it's terrible. I looked at him and said, if you would have grown up with my mother, you would have thought that this is a holiday, this is a celebration, this is great. Not that my mother, I love her, and she taught me a lot of things, but one of the things, she was a single mother. She was raising 3 hungry big boys, and she realized that if you didn't stay focused on what was happening, things could fall apart. So she made sure that we were able to focus in and got things done that we needed to get done.
That's the answer?
Okay. That's beautiful.
Pretty much, yeah.
This evening is going to be full of memories. They're all along the walls. And most of these videos are from times past, right?
They're all from time past.
I mean, really past.
Well, yes,
I don't mean last year, I mean 10, 20 years ago.
That's right. Well, I think I've been doing them since 2006, so that would make it, the oldest ones would probably be about 18 years old. On YouTube. And I think I've got over 1,700 17 or 18, I can't even keep track anymore.
It always lifted your spirit. You were having a show in this crummy little space and hoping for the best. And the door would open and in walked James Kalm. Not with a big camera crew and Secret Service. He had a little camera in his hand that kept down here a lot of the time. And when you saw him start filming, what a moment of joy, because you knew, as you were talking about attention, you were going to get some kind of attention, the best kind for your work and your show. And you gave us so many gifts, Loren. It just...
It's been my pleasure. Totally my pleasure.
Well,
I feel lucky.
I'm so glad that Phong conceived of this show to honor you, because the work you've done for this community is enormous. And I'd like to say that honoring chroniclers of the community is in the air, because just a few blocks from here on Walker Street, 42 Walker Street, is a show of portraits of the same community, of our old Brooklyn, New York community. How many, Brenda?
366.
Of the
One a day during the leap year. Thank you for mentioning that. And Happy's in it, but and probably is Houston painted.
And so is Rico.
And Rico and Lisa. I see a lot of my people here. Yeah.
We can make an appointment.
But it's from direct observation and it takes an hour, so you have to have you have to have the time. But yeah.
Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah.
I think this whole, am I on? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I think that this feels very formal. It'd be great if we could loosen it up a little bit, because we're all friends. I don't know a lot of people, but a lot of the faces are familiar. And, I'm very delighted that you asked me, Phong, old friend, to be on the panel. I'm a fan of everybody, and I started out a fan of Loren's because I started watching the videos pretty early. I mean, if you say 2006, I probably saw the first video, but the first few videos, so going back that long. And, I at some point formulated in my mind that, if you ever covered one of my shows, that I would have arrived.
I don't think that's a good joke.
No, I think that's fair. I'm not
I
joking.
think it was, he gave us a nod.
Yeah.
And it was really wonderful.
Well, because I was so I just thought it was this kind of, and I still talk about it. I was just sharing with somebody before you asked me to be on the panel. Somebody, a much younger person, former student, just talking about the show. I've shown a lot of students the videos, a lot of people. So I think it's just this amazing repository of this history, this very specific history, and it goes deep. So I was just making the case that I went back to a good old friend who's no longer in New York, but now in LA, and it's probably not painting that much, but his show was at Bellwether Gallery after they moved to Chelsea, and in I don't know 2000 and whatever it was, 9, and I just thought that but this is just this amazing sort of thing. The first action. Turn off your phone. But I just wanted to say that you eventually did cover my show in Ronald Feldman Gallery, which is right there. on the painting, and that was 2013. So it's kind of fun to look back at that, because one of the things that occurred as I was sharing the video was that you spoke to my daughter, who's now 22. Yes. You interviewed her at the end of that video, which is like really, kind of sweet, to look back at that. And so, what I'm trying to say in a very sort of like, awkward way is, it's just amazing, the whole collection of all of the energy. And it's just like staring. It's like there's a weird sort of moment, and I'll pass it on, when Phong was making his introduction, and he was literally sort of like naming people who were behind him. Don Boissing, and I think, I don't know if you mentioned Chris, but he was, there he is right there.
Joyce Gonzalo.
Joyce Gonzalo, but there were literally people like that were right behind you. But so, I don't know. We can get into this a little bit more as the night, progresses, but,
I remember one of the most memorable thing that happened to me was meeting John Updike through the great publisher, the late George Brazilla, and we had this discussion, and literally a week later, this might have been the summer 1993, when Warhol had his retrospective at MoMA, and he wrote this scathing review of the show. It is called Fast Art for Busy Manhattanite. Essentially, trashing Warhol silk green painting for being so quickly assimilated or comprehended, and then walk away from it without having any need to look closely at how it's made. Essentially, that's what the review was. So I ran into him a week later on the street, not far, right in front of the new school, and I said, I love the review, but I don't understand you hardly mention his films. Did you spend seeing the films, sir? He said, no. Well, they're very school long. They are 6, 7 hours long. So that kind of mediation between quickly, consumable and thing that is super slow. And I think that's exactly why I feel there's a side of Loren who won the bike, and he had a certain limited time to record as a videographer. It's almost like Jonas diaristics films, who invented as late 50s, super early. In fact, Warhol learned how to make film through Jonas, and that's happened about 1959 or 60. So, but then there's the other side who had to be very concise, very deliberate, and requires so much labor, Rico, to calculate, design, to make sure the painting had a certain clarity at how it's get made, the process, otherwise. And that is the opposite of the video. So I want to ask one question, and then you go next, Kathy. Is that, all right, so you came to Write for the Rail, and I remember very clearly, it was Chris Martin first who came to the Rail around the summer 2001 when he wrote the first review of Leon Garland, the late Leon Garland at retrospective. And it was a great interview, rather, it's not interview. You came a year later, actually around summer of 2003, and he wrote a wonderful review, by the way, is James Kalm. And that review was of the Great Art Gallery show entitled Park Avenue Cubist, curated by Deborah Bricker Bolton. It just meant all these wealthy American, including John L.K. Morris, Susie Phong, Frelinghuysen, exactly, Charles Saul, and Albert Gallatin. They just happen also to be fabulous collector of Cubist work. And so for the next 12 years, he wrote regularly under the name James Kalm. So my question is that going back when you were working for U-Track for a good decade or more, every day with a full-time job, he drove a truck to deliver art materials and, art supplies to artists, who in New York mostly, I'm sure. And he began keeping a notebook where he wrote down the addresses, where they work, where they live. And my question is that when did that impulse grew into the desire to begin writing? Because writing is hard. It's just as hard as making art too. And you know it, for those who write know it too. So when did that desire to write became so apparent that you began to commit yourself to it? So this is another fascination about Loren Munk, not just a painter or the videographer. Before the video became visible, I think that's when the writing stopped, lessened. So that's to me is very fascinating switch, the shift of it. So can you share with us how did that come about?
Well, a big part of this is just for my family life. Kate and I had come to New York, we met each other, got married, went out and lived in a loft in Brooklyn, trying to get people to come out and see the show, trying to promote our careers, working very hard. I was not only driving the truck, but Kate was working for Forbes magazine at the time. And which was actually nice because Forbes was about 2 blocks away from the U-Truck store, so we'd go into work every morning and on the same train and all that. And then we started to have a family. So in a lot of ways, I just kind of dropped out of the whole art scene for about 10 years. And I'm not going to say that it was bad, because spending time raising kids has got to be one of the greatest things that anybody could ever do. Anyway, after the kids started to get a little older, into their teens, Kate is looking at me and saying, and I was still working in the studio, but it was virtually impossible to get people to come out and look at the work, and or people would say, well, you were kind of part of the East Village thing, and that's like, nobody wants anything to do with that anymore. So Kate's looking at me, she said, as far as the art world is concerned, you don't exist. And I said, I thought they go, yeah. And she says, you better think about this and figure out how you're going to do something to get yourself back into the art world, that people will pay attention and start to realize that you exist. So I spent a couple months thinking about it and kind of wondering. I got a little note, or maybe I was having a conversation with a friend, Christopher Chambers, and he said, this guy Abraham Lebelski is like started this kind of a strange magazine. Half of it is in hard copy and half of it's online. But he's looking for writers. Would you be interested in doing that? And I sort of thought to myself, I don't know. It's like, of course there's no money in it. And I was thinking, well, but at least it would be a way of getting your name out there. The other thing, that was when I started to develop the pseudonym James Kalm, because I know that, especially in the New York art scene, if you get to be 40 or 45 and you haven't hit the blue chip galleries and you haven't sold a painting for $500,000 at auction, that's another reason that you don't exist, people, all these particular things. Anyway, so I thought about how would I re-enter the art thing, and but I'm going to have to do it with a pseudonym, because I didn't want to be identified as a failed painter that is now writing. So I came up with the pseudonym James Kalm, and I started trying to do some writing for Abraham Lebelski, and his thing was, well, we have a little directory at the beginning of the magazine, and it's just a couple of sentences on each one of these shows, or on a couple of shows. So go out and write like 10 of those every month. Okay, so that's great. I'd jump on the bike or do something and go out and write, like you're talking about the haiku reviews, and I wrote those for about 6 months. And the guy says, well, we kind of like what you're doing. Why don't you keep doing that, but also write a couple of pieces that are like 300 words, 350 words. Let's see how that works out. So for another 6 months, I'm doing the regular haiku little reviews, and then I started to write longer ones. I was looking at, well, first of all, it's like, the salary's good. We like that. But he's saying, okay, this is good. So I'll tell you what, why don't you try writing a couple of 800-word reviews? We'll see how that works out. So I wrote a couple of 800-word reviews, and that went on for 2 or 3 months. And then at that point he said, I think you're good to go, you can write as much as you want. And some months I was writing 10,000 words. And maybe a third of it would end up in the hard copy thing, and the rest of it, like you would read, a third of the way through the article, and it's like, you have to go online and finish reading the thing anyway. So I kept doing that for a while, and this is about the time that I started bumping into you. Also, I was still trying to learn what is aesthetics, what is art criticism, what is the history of art criticism, who in America has kind of structured our ideas about what art criticism is, what it can be, what it should be doing, how do you look at these particular ideas and put this stuff into words. So I not only was learning how to write and working with people like some of the editors at the Brook and Rail, John Yao was one of them, Thomas Michelli was one of them. These people are sort of giving me a lot of education in writing, sentence structure, how you form your ideas, various ways of putting an article together. And also I'm simultaneously studying a lot of the history of this stuff, and I've got a whole batch of paintings that are just dealing with the ideas of aesthetics. Maybe that's the next show. Anyway, I guess it was probably about 2001, 2002 that I decided, you're just going to have to take time to sit down and do some writing. So if you're kind of painting in the studio every day, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, occasionally, on the weekends we would go visit the grandparents and stuff like that. Those days were sacred. But then I had to sort of say, you know what? If you're going to do serious writing, you just have a block of time. Could be a day, could be 2 days, whatever. Not a week, but 2 or 3 days that you just sit down and you write this, and you keep working on it until you get this article done. And that kind of made me focus on how you structure your ideas, the kind of language you use. I had to be reading a lot of other critics, Clement Greenberg, Rosenberg, Hal Foster, the whole list of people. And then you would start taking notes of like, oh, look at the way that they did this. They sort of start out with this, and then they move through this way. And it was just basically a process of kind of teaching myself how to do all that stuff. But I found it very, very satisfying. Part of it was that, again, you get to like look at your friends and the people in your community, and you can sort of start to pay attention to them and acknowledge what they're doing, but also kind of trying to pull them into a larger community, people that are not in Brooklyn, people that are, in academic things, circles that are beyond just our little group of friends, and sort of putting this stuff into another context. And I did find it extremely, and I still do find it extremely satisfying. It takes a long time, and it is hard. And then when YouTube came along, I said, somehow there's something about this that we could use this to do what we're doing, writing articles or publishing things, but it would be different. And in a certain way, I still believe this, and this is one of the reasons that I love YouTube, although there's some questions there, is that, say, one picture is worth 1,000 words. 1 second of video is something like 18 moments of video. So for every second of video, you're getting something that's worth 18,000 words. And, which one is going to be more efficient? So I decided that YouTube and doing video that way would be something that I I could do, and it seemed easy. I'd already worked as a cameraman when I was still in Idaho. I worked at Channel 6 Action News. So I was a cameraman, and so every day we'd go in there, a couple of 6 o'clock newscast and the 10 o'clock newscast. I would be in there, rolling around the huge studio cameras in there and learning how to like zoom in on things and zoom out and pan here and there. But it gets you to start thinking in certain ways. And then when the YouTube thing came along, I just sort of said I put them together. And that's how I sort of started.
Okay, well, fast forward. James Kalm has hit his stride. He's a familiar scene on the scene, familiar guy on the scene. And what I loved was these very casual, in a way, videos had a structure. They always ended with Loren saying, "Thank you, Kate." Which I love. We always do.
She's my executive producer.
But they also had a familiar beginning. He'd start giving a nod to a music group, and I hope it helped them. And then, as you were opening the door to the gallery, which was a good thing to do, because we could see what the gallery was. Sometimes you were walking down the street, we knew what part of town you were in. You got the excitement of building up as you were approaching the gallery, and sometimes you would say, and a shout out to all my friends, and you would string out these names of countries. Could you do that for us? All the people around the world who were watching these videos.
Well, I'll just give you a couple of people that have sent in things recently. I got a bunch of people in Edinburgh. Shout out to Edinburgh. Some people in Madrid. I've got people in Argentina that have sent in things. I get such a kick when I see people sending in things from Beijing or Queensland in Australia or New Zealand. That's one of the other things that really gets me going is like I love that I can sort of send these things out into the world. People look at them and they can use them. You're talking about showing them to students. A lot of the people that send me stuff are teachers or people that are taking classes in various places. And it makes me feel so good to be able to know that I can send this stuff. First of all, we are all blessed that we live in one of the art capitals of the world. Some people think it's the art capital. But it's one of them. It's a major place. Most of the people in the world, like 95% of the rest of the people in the world, may never have an opportunity to actually come here, walk around, visit galleries, museums, artist studios, things like that. So by doing this, I feel like at least I'm giving these people a chance to have kind of like a little porthole into the New York art scene. I got one of my best emails, it was a few years ago. The teacher that was from Australia, and he wrote this little, very, very wonderful email to me. He goes, I'm working out here someplace out in the middle of the boonies in Australia. It's like the next town to us that has over 5,000 people in it is like 500 miles away. And I'm thinking to myself, and I'm from Idaho. It's like, you think you're on the boonies there, man? You live 500 miles away from the next town that's got 5,000 people. I think you were really out there. But he's like, so I've got these classes of kids, and we're like trying to learn about painting or modern art and all this other stuff. But then when these kids get a chance to watch your videos, they're no longer like out, at the edge of the world. They're actually part of the little New York art community. And it's so wonderful that these kids get a chance to feel like that. And I'm thinking to myself, this is great. You are part of the community, man. I want to see what you're doing, guys. Give me a chance to see what you're working on. But that was like, so that's become very important to me that, just the worldwide community is like, the worldwide community of paintheads. We love our paintheads out here. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that there is, as I mentioned earlier, there's a hermetic practice, very super disciplined focus. Can you meditating? And there's so many hours a day you can do, maybe 10 hours straight. Then you have to hop on the bike to release all of that incredible sense of focus. So it's a very interesting thrum and drag, stretch and expand and contract. To me, that is fabulously mediated. Rico, you have a question? You look at me funny. No, I was.
No, I mean, maybe more of a comment.
Yeah.
Power of the videos, because we have been focusing on the videos more than like the paintings, but so I'm going to stay with the videos. Is that, as I'm looking again, because they're right in front of me, I'm thinking about like like community, like this is a community, but like, thinking about like, as like you move through like, again, like, this chronology.
Yeah.
I think we first met, after I did the videos in Bushwick, but then there's Williamsburg, because I touched Williamsburg, like Bushwick and beyond, and then I think by the time you, again, filmed me, it was my show with Ronald Feldman. But I think that like, there's something really interesting about like, that's captured about like community, and it is specific to New York, but it's I think it's really interesting how layered it is, and how important that is, not just for the people like engaged, but like for this larger sort of global community that we speak of, that you speak of, that people can have a little peek into that. But I'm literally sitting here getting a little emotional because I'm seeing friends. I knew Don, and Joyce was somebody that was very supportive of me. I was never in a show at Sideshow. I didn't quite make it, but I'm seeing faces like James Little, who just had a show that opened last night at Petzl.
And in honor the night before?
Yeah, exactly.
At Bob Stephen Lee?
So, there's just, I'm just like flooded with all of the stuff, that's, really about like that history, that I'm quiet, I'm a little shy, I stay in, I don't get up that much. But it's nice to sort of like, just kind of be reminded that, at some point, it makes it real. It's evidence that it actually happened. So, so I think that's something that's really great. I want to point out that, like, obviously YouTube, this platform that happened before Instagram, but like you were doing this before. I used to go to artform.com. Remember what was the segment like on the scene or something like that, and like just to kind of get a sense of who was with who and what was with what and what opening happened and so on. But I think when you came along, that was like another like sort of layer of like sort of gaining access to like this world. And of course, obviously since then Instagram makes everything just kind of here. Everybody's on Instagram, yeah. But so what I'm trying to say in a very clumsy way is I think that it's a very powerful way that you utilize that tool to sort of highlight or to give access to, this world. So I could probably put that better in a few minutes, but I'm very nervous.
I like what you say. So it's just the way that Loren have able to deploy technology.
Yeah.
And that is very interesting because technology, one of the things that it was upsetting to the reason of the election, and then I was stopped there, is that no one counted Trump in his usage of Twitter. Because every time that you remember technology get invented, there's always good and bad people jump on their chance to promote their own ideas about the world. If you think about radio was invented in the late 20s by the summer 1933 when Hitler rose to power. He certainly named Joseph Goebbels to be his Minister of Enlightenment and Propaganda, and it was Goebbels who suggested the idea for him to create cheap radio and give it away to all the households across Germany with one channel is to Hitler. And so the idea is speed, the expedient, the mobilization of speed is the key to technology, no more no less than even Joseph Stalin, who had speech impediment, but he heard that Cicero, the great orator, who also suffered the same fate, have gone to before the sea, the storming sea, and put gravel on his mouth in order to speak against the aggression of the wave in order to overcome, and he did overcome. So Stalin knew the same and gained his very good voice for the radio, and you know who the best was Mussolini, the first one. Mussolini, in fact, was the first who done it effectively because he admired Marinetti. Filippo Marinetti published the Futurist Manifesto in sometime February 1909. 2 years later, he got a hold of it and brought up to the Socialist Party in Milan. His parents were serious Socialist Party members. You remember Benito is not an Italian name. That was given to him by his parents because they were admirers of Benito Juarez, the first indigenous democratic president of Mexico. I can go on further, but basically there were people who counted them. There were FDR, who had polio, hated giving public speeches, so he mastered radio, and same thing with Churchill, his distant cousin. And then there was Charles de Gaulle, and you can apply the same with the television. You know, Nixon was not good with television, sweaty, nervous, anxious, as opposed to the handsome, confident JFK. And then you name it, and then there's Reagan, and then Clinton, and no one counted Trump. So the technology interesting about, you mentioned that, thank you, Rico, because there's something about the way that we think of technological history differently. In fact, if you ever wanted to read the greatest book ever written on the subject, it's called Politics and Technology by our late friend Paul Vibrio, who died roughly before the pandemic. But basically, what Loren has been doing is reconstitute the history that once were and once never will be. This is the kind of text and historical moment wherever it exists. So in a way, you can argue that all these early modernists, no more, no less than the way that you reconstitute the Russian constructivist propaganda poster for your own interest in how to subvert it into the whole politics and history and identity politics and black history. And that's what we're doing too. Not that different, because the whole modernism, the school parents came here, fleeing from Nazi Germany in the 30s. And they are pockets. They had roots. If you look closely, starting in the chronology and how they intersect. It just means that culture is like what William de Kooning said. For milk to become yogurt, it needs culture. So it migrates unexpectedly. But what I really love, and I want to ask the question right away, is that the assembling, the idea of how to make it so legible, the fact that the font, the graphic design, the typeface, you know, and how to put it together so that they don't get crowded and overlap and destroy each other and cancel each other out. So I don't know how to, I can't imagine where it begins. So why don't you just share with us that whole process?
Okay, well, I was basically a hippie kid. I ran away to Haight-Ashbury when I was 15. I dropped acid at the Haight Street entrance to Golden Gate Park, maybe 3 days after I got to San Francisco. But part of that whole thing was there was the tradition of the psychedelic posters. Family Mouse, there were a couple of design studios that really did. Peter Max was part of that, maybe. Whole bunch of these people, and they inspired me. They did a lot of album covers and all kinds of things, and I loved it. And as I got older, I came back to Idaho and was going to school. I was working for Idaho State University in the programs department, and part of my job was to design posters for them. So for a couple of years, I would go and I'd do my studies and visit the classes, and then I would have a job for 2 or 3 hours, depending on how many posters we had to do. I'd have a job for a couple of hours every day in a tiny little studio designing posters. And so a lot of that, and I had a friend that unfortunately passed away recently. He was from the East Coast, and he had his own vision of aesthetics. But we got together, and so we'd be sitting down there trying to say, God, you know, we did this poster like 2 weeks ago. We got another thing to do this, but we don't want to do it the same. We want to do something different. And so we started kind of collecting ideas. You're talking about the aesthetics of the constructivists or the supremacists and the psychedelic posters, or Art Nouveau, Art Deco. You know, there's a whole thing called the nuclear style from the 50s. All kinds of stuff. And so we would just kind of spend a lot of time like collecting these things together, and then we'd be looking at them and sort of thinking, hey, what can we do? But from that, I also learned that typefaces and fonts are actually very beautiful, but they're also like color, shapes, and forms. They also have a certain thing, an emotional resonance that they recall when you look at them, that make you feel or think a certain thing. And I probably spend way too much time just scrolling through typefaces and looking at things and going, if I was to see a poster that had these kind of words, what would that say to me? I mean, I've got some of my favorite typefaces, and some of them I just like the names of them. Hottenschweller, it's a great name. But I do spend a lot of time, anybody that's out in the world today, I mean, if you're reading the newspapers, looking at the magazines, posters, advertisements, a lot of stuff on TV, they're all using various kinds of typefaces. We were coming in on the subway today, and Kate's looking up, she's going, man, look at that, and so you're looking at that and going, okay, that's a particular kind of a typeface, using a particular kind of color, all these other various things. And I just decided that this is actually something that I could use and do a lot with. I have a couple of things that I want to do when I make a painting. One of them is, first of all, you just want to make a good painting, an attractive painting, a beautiful painting. And that's using composition, color, design, line, shape, form. Then I have another thing that I would like to do, which would be to just sort of try, at least for some of the paintings, would be to try to express some kind of information that could be valuable to the consumer, which would be anybody that's basically looking at the painting. So then you could go into the whole question of, well, what would be valuable to somebody? So I sort of, like Ad Reinhardt has said, it's like art is art and everything else is something else. So I'm saying, well, if I'm interested in art, then I just gotta focus in on the art as art. And that would be something that I could play with and kind of emphasize as far as what my little practice is. And then it's just a matter of working with it for many years and sort of becoming comfortable with certain kinds of things. You were talking about how it's being able to put this stuff all together without it overlapping or destroying other things. Well, that's part of it, but in a certain way, some of the paintings, they do get covered up. Things get slightly covered up, a corner, something gets covered by something else, and maybe part of a word gets lost. But I'm thinking that's a perfect analogy of the way that art history functions. There's always going to be something that's going to sort of cover up or erase certain parts of history, but that's kind of the way it goes. So I like it, I use it, but I feel like I can't get too explicit about it, because it kind of, that point it kind of loses its spontaneous, kind of whimsical aspect.
Kathy?
Moving right along, thanks for that overview. Thanks for deep dive into the paintings here. Back to the videos. You would walk into a crowded opening, and sometimes it was too much, and you have to come back and the place is empty out. But often,
You talk about your Canada show where you came back?
no, I'm not.
You should, because that show was so crowded. You had to come back the next day.
You would take your camera and you would give us an idea of the room, which was full of voices and conversations, and you called us all paint heads. And you'd often name us. Oh, I see over there
Yeah.
James Sienna. And you know, the next day when you looked at it all, you realized that we existed, and that the painting community, goddammit, was strong and vital. And this could be during a time when painting was under siege. So I think you're paying attention to what we were doing and going to these gatherings of people who were all deeply interested in each other's work was really a valuable thing. I remember after hearing you say once or twice, oh, there's Katherine Bradford. Oh my God, I exist. This is a real thing.
You mean if I went back and erased the videos, you'd sort of disappear?
Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I did want to say that this is a beautiful thing. Kathy's son, Arthur, and my son, Freddie, are out in California. They're both engaged in the documentary film thing. And Kathy's son, Arthur, has been a very kind of great mentor to my son, Freddie. And so, my blessings for that.
I'm not surprised they both went into film, are you?
Well, I recommended that he should do something more practical, but I guess not.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing about the writing. You know, the writing, when it migrates from the written text into the painted text, then Loren stopped writing altogether. So that migration is, to me, that's fascinating, Kathy. When you were talking about the reassurance of somebody's existence, this is the history that also go further back. Without the writing, it's very hard to validate or resurrect somebody's existence. I mean, we forgot that, take someone like Piero della Francesca, who was one of the great masters, one of the four Florentine masters who invented the art of perspective. In addition to Paolo Uccello, Andrea Mantegna, I just can't imagine that his painting of fresco was celebrated at his time, no more no less than the way Vermeer painting were considered a minor talent, only known in the circle of Delft and maybe Amsterdam, because production was also small, no more than 40 paintings, you know? But it's always about the writing that brings the attention to this work. It wasn't for Sir Charles Eastlake. We all remember him because he wrote the famous book, The Artist's Materials. But it was him who spent time in Tuscany and basically discovered piano and wrote beautiful essay on it and bought 2 paintings for. He was the first rector of the National Gallery Board in London, and he's the one who bought the great 2 paintings, Nativity and I think the Baptism of Christ. Thank you so much. Brilliant painting. That's right story. So but he was forgotten for I would say 230 something years. You know? So the writing is so incredible important. Even the mere mention of Katherine Bradford brought her such joy, as you saw just now, you know? So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we open up, because we do want to go to dinner. What time do we do it?
7:25.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering about, like, you talk about, like, you know, obviously writing the text, but, you know, the way that I sort of, because I don't really read that, I don't like to read, like on the galleries. Of course, I'm drawn into the work because of, you know, other formal elements, if you will, like pattern, you know, texture, layering.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the first conversations I think that we had was somebody that I probably was like introduced to around the time that I was starting to see him show up in your videos, who was Alfred Jensen, somebody that's important to me. So like I'm kind of wondering about, like, you know, maybe that influence, but another thing that I'm thinking about is, like, you know, perhaps, and this might sound a little cliche, but music. You know, 'cause I think a lot about music, you know, but I just want to add a little aside. I also come from, I started out studying graphic design before I went into fine art. So like that's something that, you know, is, that I want to point out. It's like, you know, something that I respond to in the work, you know. So from literally from a formal standpoint, but I don't feel that this work is about graphic design. You know, in the sense that it's like sort of like mired or, you know, weighted down by that. I mean, it feels like more particularly, I don't know how recent, assuming these are all pretty recent paintings.
Well, seeing as how some of them take me like 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. There is that time as well, that, you know, is of interest, but, you know, should you talk about it?
How I design them, or my ideas while I'm building a painting.
Or any of those like sort of relationships, like music, pattern,
Okay,
math.
one thing I would like to say is that I haven't given up writing. For each one of the videos that I do, and for the last 18 years or something like that, I was doing 2 of them a week. Recently, I've had to cut down a little bit because it's just become so complex to produce a video anymore, and then I've got to link it up to Instagram and Twitter and all these other things, and you got to do thumbnails, and it ends up taking a lot more time. For each one of these videos, I have to write what they call a review, or a little description. And I would say that they probably run into maybe a couple hundred words, maybe longer. So I'm still doing some writing. And you were talking about you don't like to read when you go into a gallery. I meet a lot of people that say, or that they feel like you've got text and things that you read, and although you read them visually, we don't want that part of the brain infringing on the part of the brain that we look at when we just see color, line, shape, form, because these 2 enclaves of your conceptual structure of the brain are arguing, they're fighting with each other. Gee, am I going to look at this and have some kind of a sense that I've got to derive some kind of linguistic thing out of this, as opposed to the strictly visual part where you just say, I love or identify or derive some kind of an emotional satisfaction from seeing just the color, the line, the shape, the composition. that's one of the things that I always try to deal with. I like that kind of the fighting of the things of, you know, it could be the rational versus the irrational, or however you want to divide up the spectrum. I love music, and that's one of the reasons that I put the buskers or the street musicians at the beginning of every one of the videos. One of the things is, like I said, I've done over 1,700 of these, and after about 10 or 12, you kind of figure out what you're doing. So, you know, 1,000 times after that, you pretty much have an idea. I have found, and this is no kidding, I have found that I can do a video of a painting show, and I'll sort of go, well, it's kind of this, kind of that. But if I have like a really good street musician at the beginning of playing a good song, and you sort of turn it down as you sort of start to walk through the show, I will get people that will say, fantastic show, beautiful show, great. But they're not really conscious of the fact that I've kind of like, oh, I'm going to manipulate this. And it's not that I'm doing it intentionally. The other thing that I like about what I do is that a lot of the musicians that I have in this, I'll come in and I'll do a report somewhere, and I'll be pedaling around, and I have my little circuit where I know where people play music, and I'll go there and I just happen to be looking up, it's like, oh gee, look at this guy, this lady or whoever is good, and I'll go up there, make a little video of them, and I'll just kind of put that together because I really want to show what's happening at a particular place at a particular time, and when you can mash this all together into a nice little ball, it gives people an idea of what was happening in that particular moment. So that's all important to me. And on the other hand, I also have things where it's like, I'll see people out there, and they are trying their damnedest to do some kind of a rendition of something. And I will look at them, and I'll be recording them, and I'll give them money, and I'll go home and I'll just look at it and go to myself, wow. But I put it in there as well because in a certain way, I feel that you could say that the street musicians are like the perfect analogy of the artist. They're out there, some people might like them, some people might not like them, but they're out there, there's no screen behind them, behind which they are hiding. It's just them doing their thing on the street, and a lot of times it's like just the fact that they're like putting everything into it. And it might not be the greatest, but the fact that they're putting it in there says to me, yeah, they need to be acknowledged as well as everybody else, you know? So that's always kind of a fun thing. And the paintings are one thing, the videos are another thing. If I was to, and sometimes I'll be doing things on the videos where I decide, gee, there's, and this is actually kind of common, where you see certain similar tendencies in a group of work. So I might be running around and go, well, you were talking about the group of portraits that are down in the gallery on Walker Street of a lot of the community. There's this. There are other things where I see people doing things that are kind of similar and related, and so I'll try to somehow mash these together into a way but a lot of it is spontaneous because I'm just running around and going in and start talking and doing this and that. Very rarely do I go home and like do a voiceover where I sort of change what I might have said or something else. Mostly it's like a collage. You're out there recording various things, and then you go home and you paste it together and hope that it comes out good. I see a lot of stuff on YouTube these days where people spend a lot of time basically creating everything in the studio. You know, they've got their face towards the camera, they got the blue screen behind them so they can put it in whatever they want. They've got great microphones and everything that can pick up, but it's basically, it's all edited, it's all created in the studio. One of the things that I always wanted to do was to try to capture as much of the real world as I can. And if I can do that, I think I'm doing a successful job.
And I just want to point out that, as I'm listening to you and, sitting here with y'all, that the real beauty of what you've done is, it's something that I think about a lot as an artist, particularly living in this beautiful city that we live in, is that it's hard to do this. And, so the word that comes to mind is like generosity. It's like a real generosity to this archive. There's a real generosity to what you've done. And that's the power. That's you have a full house, But I think that that's the most beautiful thing. And that's the thing that I think that I was drawn to right away. This is
I couldn't be generous without Kate.
I mean, obviously, Kate.
Thank you, Kate.
It's still, it's like thank you, Kate, as well. And, but I think that that's something that I just wanted to add to this.
Yeah, it's a true generosity that stems from the worldview, which is that of the democratic vistas, just like War Woodlands, so America at the time. So that's what we're going through right now. So I'd like to actually open up so we could get a few questions from you. Oh yeah, we have one right away. Yes.
Yeah, hi. I've got a little homework that I've been doing, so excuse me if I seem like strangely over-prepared.
I'm going to be doing the same thing with Stuart tomorrow up at Gap Space, in case anybody wants to be up at Gap Space up there, Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn. 3 o'clock.
So, Loren, I love the paintings. I mean,
Thank you.
So much, and I want to jump in a little bit on some of the things that you were talking about in terms of the toggling back and forth between the different
How
sides.
about
of the,
standing up?
oh yeah, the different sides of the mind, right? And it reminds me of Albert's factual facts and actual facts, right? So like.
You mean Reinhardt's Facts and Actual Facts, or
This is Albert. Albert's has
Joseph
this thing
Albers.
about Joseph Albers has this
Okay.
thing about actual facts and factual facts, and that the factual fact is the physical reality. Maybe in this case it's the text, and the actual fact is the psychological effect of witnessing and looking and watching. And in my experience of looking at the paintings, the way they conjure memory. Some people some personally, some people you don't know, but you know of them. Being a New Yorker or knowing the streets, you're in your time looking at a past time. So the way that they're not just chronicles of community, they're also chronicles of the development of the city. But then in relationship to the formalism, it's really complex the way those two things are happening simultaneously. You're reading and you're watching, and and I also feel like the timelines of sort of early modernism in America up until sort of postmodernism, which seems to be the range of the things that you are occupying here. The formal construct is like an amalgam of those pictorial adoptions of those modernists as a way of critiquing the people in the past. And so they're a kind of like soup or blended formalism, Pop's use of kitsch vocabulary, the poster, the text, a sort of labor, or getting rid of the idea of the master, a Warholian sort of factory production vocabulary, the stencil, the use of a color construct that is about solving the problem of contrast rather than atmosphere, mood, psychology, right? And so the paintings really they function, or they perform their content, right? In amazing ways. It's a very weird thing to really look at the painting. When I was up there looking at them, there are all these things at work, and I feel that the materiality and the references of the form, the formal references, they're not just aesthetic. they come with the history built into them. And those things are at work at the same time, you know? And I kind of not really ever experienced that before in anything, really, you know? So I don't really have a question as much as
Beautiful comment.
Thank you.
because yeah, you know, I mean, you were talking about it, but I guess if there's a question here, it would be, you know, it seems like when you were talking that you're talking about problem solving, right? You know, that's sort of what you're at. But I mean, do you sense that? Do you think like, you know, because like, you know, Bachner will like, you know, he'll make a painting that's 12 inches and he'll write 12 inches on it, and you know, Johns will have like Johns' False Start, 1959. You know, these sort of text to image problems, like, you know, it's a red mash and it says yellow in stencil, but the yellow is painted blue. You know, so there are these sort of similar gestures, but yours is in service to a real chronology instead of sort of language games, right? I mean, it's pretty.
No, that's
pretty amazing. You
Say
know?
that's fair.
So, are you working on this in the studio?
Well,
I mean, you
yes,
are obviously.
I am, but as I said, I don't want to get too bogged down in all these kind of theoretical, because I want to keep it kind of fun and lively. But one of the things that sort of differentiates what I'm doing from a lot of people that are doing various things. John J. O'Connor is an artist that does a lot of things with images and all kinds of connections between these things, but it's all kind of fantasy, fun things. One of the things that has been important for me is to try to be as accurate and factual as I can be. And I've literally spent weeks and months, sometimes even longer, trying to track down people's exact addresses. You know, so I read something like, well, so-and-so lived on East 9th Street, and it's like, okay. Then you start to have to go down, and how do you find these things? I've had to go out and try to find various sources for addresses and things like that. One of the great books I found was A Club Without Walls. I think it was by Philip Avila. And he was the secretary at the Artists Club, and part of what they did was they actually, at the end of the book, they publish photos of the ledger book of all of the artists who were in the Artists Club, and it has got all of their addresses in there. So I bought the book, I went home, and I sat in front of my computer for several hours, typing in every address that I could find with the names. This is all part of my database. I've had to do that with other sources that I find. But that is an important aspect, to try to make that kind of the factual reality part of, and making that a priority is a very important part of what I'm doing. The other thing is that I'm working on a map now, and I was joking with Benno about it. I'm working on a map now of Tribeca. And Tribeca happens to be like the hot neighborhood in New York these days. And we're saying that in, I don't know, there's maybe in the last 2.5 years, 60 galleries have opened down here. I've kind of spent a lot of time sort of following various neighborhoods, Soho, the East Village, uptown, downtown, Bushwick, Williamsburg, various places. I started out about 2 years ago doing a map that started on Quinty Slip and downtown, because I'd never done that part of New York before. Prudence Pfeffer came out with a great book about a year ago. It's called The Slip. Of course, I bought it, and it was actually very helpful, because it was like telling me exactly where certain addresses of buildings were, because a lot of this stuff is gone. It's just erased. Huge skyscrapers there, all these things. So I was joking with Benno, you know where the Tribeca, what the center of Tribeca is going to be in the new map? Ruttkowski 68. But that's not untrue, because I'm looking at the way the map is set out, and it's actually gonna extend over to what they call the Two Bridges neighborhood. It's gonna go all the way over to the river, and then down to, forget what the bottom street was. Anyway, so I'm working on this map, and I'm designing this all out, and coming up with all the names of the street, and lettering them all in. So then and then it's like you do that all day long, and then you jump on your bicycle and you pedal across the bridge, and you come down across the same bridge that you just worked on in part of the Brooklyn Bridge map, St. James Place, Worth Street, and you start driving up the same streets that you've been designing and putting on this map, and suddenly you're going, oh, yeah, this is where that, oh yeah, okay, now I understand this, and the valley comes into this, but it ends here, and all these other things. And it's a kind of a surreal experience to sort of switch from one realm of conceptual imagery of how things are laid out, and then to be down there with the bicycle. It's like, you know, watch out, that cab's going to open, somebody's going to open the door in the back of that cab, you're going to have to zoom into the other lane. So that was just one of the other fun things I have when I'm doing that kind
Yeah,
of
so just to answer your question, I think he's a curator of his own painting, and he's an archivist on the bike. So that's the two function all simultaneously.
Yeah.
The curator at home painting the history, the archivist on the bike collect the information, the data.
Yeah.
And I think that's the two duality
Yeah.
that exists very simultaneously, not true? So second question, yes sir.
So the other thing, when I was looking at, when I've been looking at your work for years, and I always considered that you were fascinated by the way in which the artist socially grew in certain sections of the city, certain areas during certain periods of time, and you're fascinated by the social intersection and how that conglomerates into movements in art and ideas in art and the thinking. So you didn't expound on that, but
Well, this show basically is the maps, and I have other series of works. One of them is what I call the colliding timelines. So I've got a piece that's in the Brooklyn Museum, 200-year celebration anniversary of the Brooklyn Museum. It's called the Colliding Timelines of the Pictures Generation. And it starts out with Douglas Crimps curating a show called Pictures at Artist Space in 1977. And in that show, I think he put in 6 artists in the show. And the reason that this was fascinating was because when I got to New York, 1979, these were kind of the people who were starting to move up and become, getting a lot of attention, getting a lot of publicity, getting a lot of press. And so I just spent a lot of time paying, as everybody, sort of look at who's popular, who's getting on the cover of Art Forum this month, who's being covered in the New York Times, who's doing this, who's doing that. And you sort of look at that and go, well, I'm living in some little rat hole out in Red Hook, and meanwhile these people are, in the Whitney Biennial and getting one-person shows, and so that's kind of that's the goal. Or at least maybe that's sort of setting the standard, the upper standard of what you could be striving for. But, and then when you spend time, as I said, I had to spend some time reading art criticism, but a lot of that also you have to relate this to art history. So when you see Clement Greenberg is writing about Helen Frankenthaler in a particular way, and then you start to see Helen Frankenthaler is being put into these collections and being shown here and there, you're sort of going, well, I guess that's the way our history functions. But then as you start to dig a little deeper, you find out that, gee, Clement Greenberg and Helen Frankenthaler were a couple for a long time. They were having an affair. And then you realize, and then Harold Rosenberg actually wrote some things about Helen Frankenthaler that were not so flattering. And then you're sort of thinking, and that has become part of art history as well. And then you're thinking, art history is not this thing that just happens. It's not like, natural history where it's like, oh, the volcanoes go off and they lay ash over this and then, you know, the trees start to grow away. It's not like that. Art history is a battlefield, and we're still fighting art history. Stuff that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago, we're still fighting over it, but it's not just something that happens. You were talking about it. Somebody comes along and they write a review about something or someone. That sort of exists. Of course, then you might have someone who will say, no, I'm going to try to make that go away, so I'm going to write a counter review that says, this is the worst crap that ever happened. Nobody's intelligent should be paying attention to that. Then somebody else will say, well, you're wrong there. We're going to go along, and we're going to be on the Kalm Greenberg side, and we're going to push this along. So that's another mapping technique that I use. I've got other things where they're just dealing with the idea of consciousness and aesthetics. A whole lot of various things. And I think it's, and one of the things that I'm trying to express is that, well, first of all, art history is always, it's not neutral. It's always from some point of view. There's always some perspective of what's really valid. Why should I even bother trying to record this stuff if it's not my taste, my little group of friends or whatever, my class, that I'm going to be pushing forward. So that's one of the things that I can make people aware of, that this isn't neutral. Then the other thing is like, well, everybody that's out there looking at this stuff in a certain way, you're creating your own history of art. I think, well, maybe this is after that right now. Somebody said something to the effect that everybody has their own art DNA. And it's not that the DNA is passed on in your cells or anything like that, but everything that you grew up with, that was in your house, the people you talk to, your friends, your family, your school, all these things have all programmed the way you think about art. And then, if you have enough power, you can sort of also imply that because you believe these things, like the group that you're in believe these things, you are right. You somehow are like on a little better plane than everybody else. We think that color field painting is better than pop art. We think, conceptual art is more interesting than minimalism. And if you agree with us, well, it just means you're a better person than all those other people. And part of what I'm doing is saying, you have to just slow down and look and say, well, maybe, maybe not. A lot of people get upset with me. Well, is this the best thing you've ever seen or not? Well, maybe, maybe not. No, we don't want maybe not. Yes. And it's like, oh, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. And then you can only actually start to see what happens historically by looking back in time. And even then, it's not like, well, this was right and that was wrong. It's kind of like, it was what? And people will reevaluate history again and again and again, and you keep going down the line. And that's why it makes it so interesting that everybody can hash it out with everybody.
One last question before we go to dinner. Just one more.
I just wanted to say that thank Loren, because I showed at Sarah Bowen Gallery right after you, Phong, back in, I don't know what year that was, 2003. Kathy, 6. Kathy, you showed there also. And Loren, you reviewed my show. And when you were saying, Phong, about if you're not written about, don't exist, I made a narrative series about a house painter who was an artist. Painterman. And you started out the review by saying, Mama, sons grow up to be cowboys. And that was a fantastic way to frame.
Don't let them grow up to be painters.
And then you parlayed into that. So thank you for that, Mark. But I also want to pick up on what Rico your being in the art world. And I think that's incredibly generous.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me say one final thing, and that is that, thank you, Rick. I just feel incredibly blessed to have been able to capture a little bit of this community, our friends, these people that have similar aspirations. We're all human beings. The world is a messed up place. Life is a mess. If there are a few things that you can sort of cling to and hope that you can push forward, that it's going to give you some kind of satisfaction and some value, thank God. And I just want to thank you all, because all of the people that I've dealt with have all been generous to me, and all I can do is try to reflect that back to you. So thank you.
Yeah.